will say this. I am anxious to see TJ Hall this weekend, and we can kind of transition into special teams now, Mark, if you want, because TJ Hall is not only going to get more run this Saturday at corner, but he's also going to get some run on special teams. It sounds like he's really done well in the return game. I think they're really comfortable right now with Charlie Jones returning punts. But Charlie Jones was good returning kicks, but I don't think there's any guarantee there that you have to run with Charlie returning kicks, especially when he's going to get more and more ride on offense as a receiver. He's going to get carries out of the backfield and whatnot. So TJ Hall has looked good in special teams. Sounds like Cooper DeJean. I know there's a lot made this past week when LeVar Woods, special teams coordinator, met with the media because he made a point of bringing up that Cooper DeJean might end up being Iowa's holder. Now, I want to talk about that for a second, Mark, because I had an interesting conversation with Don Patterson last night about this very subject, because I was just curious. Has there ever been a situation that you can remember of a defensive player being the placeholder? And he couldn't think of one. And he's not averse to this idea. But, Mark, it's a little bit odd to have a defensive back be your holder, right? It's a strange situation, right?
It's usually the punter or it's the backup quarterback.
Correct. So that'll be interesting. And, of course, everybody's assuming that means that LeVar and company they're planning on some trickeration this fall, which would be great because that worked a lot in 2017, 2018. They ran a lot of fakes. The polecat against Ohio. Well, you're Ohio State Buckeyes. You remember the polecat play that Tyler Kluber falls short of the goal line, but made the first down. It was a pretty cool play from Colton Rastetter, the punter. And they had a pass to, I think it was AJ Epinesa against Michigan State in 2017. And they had a touchdown at Penn State in 2018 on a trick play. So they execute them really well. It's funny. You watch these plays and if you look back to 2017, 2018, I don't know why they ran a bunch of fakes those 2 years, but you watch these plays and it's like, man, that looks like a really low percentage play. And yet it worked. It worked out like every time. I don't remember a failed attempt. They had one at Penn State, and I'm trying to think of the big defensive lineman that caught it. And his name slips my mind, but a big defensive tackle. And I believe it was Colton Rastetter that threw a beautiful lob off of fake where he started right with some misdirection, threw it back left, and this big defensive tackle catches it over his shoulder in coverage for the touchdown. It's like, how does that work? But it did. So, if Cooper DeJean, who's going to have an opportunity to return kicks, he's going to have an opportunity to play on defense, whether that be at cash, safety, or at cornerback. If he's the holder, I think that'll probably, don't you think that'll leave some defensive coordinators and some head coaches up at night thinking about, potentially, and you don't normally say that. When have we ever said, Mark, that Iowa's game planning leaves opposing coaches up at night? I mean, it just doesn't, because coaches have been on the record, Mark, to say that Iowa is one of the most predictable schools. Now, they do everything very well. Typically, they do almost everything very well. That's what makes them hard to defend, but they're not unpredictable. But you get Cooper DeJean back there being the holder. That just, even if you don't run anything, that's gonna play some mind games, I think, on opposing teams.
And that's what makes the rash of special teams gadget plays ironic, is that the same head coach that is giving the thumbs up to run these gadget plays, these trick plays on special teams, won't open up the offense and get creative with the offense.
Isn't it an odd concept? Because that's exactly what I said back in 2017. They actually ran a play. And why I remember all this, don't ask me. I think it was actually 2018 at Minnesota. They lined up in the oddest formation, and Iowa fans will remember the play I'm talking about. They lined up maybe at the 5-yard line in the oddest formation you could imagine on fourth down, where they basically had the center lined up by himself, okay? And I don't know, you maybe had 2 guys to the left and then like 4 guys to the right, if I'm counting correctly. Something like that, and then had a couple guys in the backfield. But the snapper, and I'm trying to think who the snapper was, but he was a lefty, and he snapped the ball to his left with his left hand, shovel passed it to his left. TJ Hawkinson was the guy on the left side of that line, that segment on the right of the field, and he runs end around to the corner of the end zone for a touchdown. It's just the oddest thing. But when you see a Kirk Ferentz team do that, the fans love it, Mark. I love it. Because even if it's LeVar Woods, it tells you, hey, Kirk isn't as stuck in his mold as we once thought he was. The problem is they have abandoned that, Mark. That hasn't. I don't know the last time they've successfully ran. They haven't really even attempted. Maybe two in the past 3 seasons. Now maybe that's a little low, but I know this past year I don't remember a single play that was ran in special, and I don't know why that is. It might have been because Colton Rastetter, as the punter at the time, although he wasn't a great punter, he could throw the ball and do some different things. That might have been a factor. Torrey Taylor. The thing with Torrey Taylor, if you want to run Torrey Taylor back there, he hadn't played American football for very long. When he got here, so you can have him throwing the football. I think that might be a factor. But if you get Cooper DeJean back there, my guess is that they've worked on some stuff this season because, Mark, as much as we've talked about the offense needing help and needing to improve, there's no question that the special teams unit can help. I mean, if you get to fourth down inside the 10, you either kick a field goal and you settle for 3, or you take a shot with your special teams unit getting a touchdown. That's the equivalent of an offensive play in the red zone. So it is exciting. I always tell people, don't read too much into the hype that the media puts out there with spring practice, because, Mark, you've been there. You used to cover college football from a different standpoint, and a lot of it's just hype, and we got to create headlines and we got to create attention. I know back when you were covering the beat, it's probably mostly, well, you never, did you ever do sports writing for a newspaper, or were you strictly on as a sportscaster on television?
No sports writing professionally. No.
But I mean, again, you if you're just constantly recapping, well, they ran this drill, they did this today, they did this. I mean, you got to actually find some, and the media does a good job of that, finding stories within the lines, so to speak. And so don't read too much into that. But the fact that they are running Cooper at placeholder is significant. The other battle on special teams, Mark, that's going to be worth following is the battle at kicker. Is it going to be Amaya? Is it going to be Blom? Is it going to be the new kid, Drew Stevens, who enrolled early as a walk-on? They've got some battling going on there at place kicker, and that's a very significant battle, Mark, because let's just reflect for a second on Iowa's recent history at that position. Marshall Kane. The first thing you think of when you think of Marshall Kane is a 57-yard field goal in 2015 to beat Pittsburgh inside Kinnick. Keith Duncan. How many game-winning kicks did he have, whether it be Michigan at home as the number 2 team in the country, final game of his career at Nebraska where he blows the kiss to the crowd. Miguel Racino's hit a game winner in the last game against Nebraska. I believe it was his senior year. Caleb Shudak was one of the best kickers in the country last year. I mean, they've just had an incredible run at that position. So assuming you have a drop-off, and I don't want to assume that, but let's just hypothetically assume that they have a drop-off, that's going to really hurt things, because kicking was a big part of why they were able to survive despite a subpar offense and win 10 games. All the kicks Caleb Shudak had last year, if you take a hit at that position, it's going to affect you immensely. So they need to figure out that position. I haven't heard of anybody specifically that's emerged. I know some people are really high on Drew Stevens, a young kid. Maybe he ends up being the guy. Had heard good things about Amaya. So we'll just have to wait and see. That will be an interesting battle as well, because that's easy to rate, on Saturday in spring practice. There is a forecast of 20 to 30 mile per hour winds during the day Saturday. So they'll be tested, and fans will be able to get kind of a gauge as to where those 3 guys are.
The real MVP is giving you, Corey, your periodic exhortation to go ahead and give us a mad rant. He enjoys those, and he believes that they are good for the brand, good for the channel. So feel free.
What am I mad about? I mean, what was that? Have I been mad today, Mark? I don't think I've been mad about anything.
I think you just referenced maybe ranting at another time.
Sure. I don't have anything to rant about today. I'm pretty, let's be honest, I think all Iowa fans should be almost just as happy with LeVar Woods as they are with Phil Parker. I mean, we've talked about the special teams unit, Mark. It's just rarely something that Iowa has to worry about anymore. They had a couple of years with struggling punters. Here's a storyline, Mark. The reason they need a new placeholder is because their most recent placeholder, Ryan Gersonde, who was I believe a 5-star punter. Iowa gives this kid a scholarship, and by the way, they very rarely give punters and kickers, long snappers, scholarships. They give this kid a scholarship out of high school, and he never, ever is the starting punter for Iowa. He was here for 5 years, Mark. He had him on scholarship for 5 years as a punter. He never played more than being a placeholder. So he is now gone. They need that position filled. But besides Gersonde and Rastetter that struggled at times, Dylan Kidd was a pretty good punter. Michael Steve Dalton, the transfer from Arizona State, was a good punter. And I got Torrey Taylor. These last two guys have been Australian punters. You see kind of a trend going there across the country. And then again, the string at the kicker position. Now, they did struggle at long snapper at times last year. I remember there was a block kick against Northwestern because of a bad snap. There's such little margin for error, as you know, at long snapper, Mark. That's just such you better be on target almost every snap. So we'll see what happens. But the bottom line is not much to worry about at that position. It'll be, if they don't figure out a better option in kick returning, like if Cooper DeJean isn't, or I keep saying DeJean, man alive, Cooper DeJean is not like spectacular returning kicks, or TJ Hall isn't spectacular. Another guy that I mentioned who's returning kicks in practice is Arlen Bruce. If none of those guys are off the charts, I'm sure they'll just stick with Charlie Jones. And Charlie has proven he can handle a decently large workload, because I still don't think Charlie's he might be in the top two as it relates to receivers with Keegan Johnson and maybe then Charlie, but you got Nico Reganey and Arlen Bruce there as well. He can handle a heavy workload, whether he be returning punts, kicks, catching footballs, or all of the above. So they have options. It's always good to have options. Kicker is by far the biggest question mark right now.
I am curious to get Don Patterson's perspective on this. I have a thought that special teams are not as important as they used to be for these reasons. One is that the punters' hang time is generally better than it used to be. Therefore, as you see, plus the teams returning the punt don't go for the block as much as they used to. So it used to be pretty standard that teams that are returning the ball would go for the block. But obviously the risk to reward situation there is not typically deemed worth it. So teams are not going for the block. What they're doing is they're peeling back, which allows the punter to, now you'll see the punter catch the ball and it'll kind of give it a look like, okay, is there a rush? No, there's not a rush. So I can take my time and really get into this kick. Therefore, it allows the coverage to get down there. Therefore, there are less returns. Number two, kickoffs. We all know what the rule changes have been there.
I think that needs to change, for the record, Mark. That's just a wasted procedure. Absolutely. That we have.
Because what happened, about 10 years ago was that I don't think it's been quite that long, but anyway, 7 or 8 years ago, they went from touchbacks going out to the 20, then to the 25, which deterred kickoff returners even more from returning the ball. And now, exponentially more than that, they make it a fair catch, and you can make a fair catch at the 2, the 13, the 8, wherever you want, and it's coming out to the 25-yard line.
What's the point of that? Is it to reduce injuries?
The point of that?
Is it injuries?
It's injuries, yes.
Okay, then why do we even have a kickoff? Why don't we just start from the 30
it's tradition.
Well, but then let it be tradition. Let's not screw something up. Either have it or don't have it. I hate the fair catch rule is worse than the 25-yard rule. If you catch the ball outside the end zone, you should have to come out.
Absolutely.
And if you're afraid your guy's going to get injured, then play someone else. Don't have your best players back there.
Or down the ball and pay the consequences of downing the ball, fair catching the ball at the 12-yard line. That's where you get the ball.
Right.
I hate when there are rules that are put into play that go against the structure of the sport, because there's nothing within the sport of football that has been within the rule of play that would tell you that if on a kickoff, a player catches the ball, that it would just artificially be advanced to some determined spot on the field. That it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't, and let's remind everybody, if you don't get rid of it completely, you're still going to have catastrophic injuries. Let's bring up a perfect example. The kid from Maryland, Demas, last year against Iowa, but breaks his leg on a special teams return with the rules instituted. So either take them away completely or don't. you're wasting practice time by having. Now, I don't know how much these coaches. I'm sure they practice it a lot less now. But I do think it's. I mean, look at Tim Dwight. I mean, the guy was a. Well, think about. Now his name's gonna evade me. Um, Steve Suter, Maryland. Can't believe I came up with that name. We had him on last year during Iowa Maryland week. And that guy never he never called for a fair catch. Literally never. So I think it's great for the sport. And I understand trying to limit injuries, but just everything that the NCAA does, I have suspicion towards. So it's because of injuries. I question everything with the NCAA anymore.
So my questions for Don Patterson are going to be, number one, has it been statistically proven that there are more injuries in special teams play, or is it just assumed that the more football we eliminate, the more hitting we eliminate, we're going to eliminate? And that makes sense.
Sure.
That doesn't mean we eliminate, we're going to eliminate first down now.
Yeah.
So
why not, though? I mean, if that's the line of reasoning, then let's just make the quarter shorter. Let's just make the game shorter. I'll tell you what, what doesn't help injuries? Having these long Fox timeouts. These long timeouts where guys are standing on the sideline every couple of minutes. That's what doesn't help injuries, because guys tense up, they get cold, and then they get hurt. So don't give me this baloney about you're doing this for the players when you have these players who are forced to sit for timeouts and then they get hurt. So, yeah.
So yes, my question number one for Don is whether there is an inordinate amount of injuries percentage-wise during special teams play. And number two, with what I just outlined, limiting the number of special teams plays, it would only make sense to me that special teams are less important in today's game than they were 10 years ago.
Yeah, and I've had those conversations, but we can definitely ask him again.